Alright, this is following order of operations using integers and absolute value signs. The trick to this is remembering always to keep track of what you're doing. So in problem 16, I like to think of it as the first line here, and then we'll create a second line. So we'll use letters. And what we're going to work out first in this problem, because it's addition, subtraction, and addition, you just go from left to right. And just do so methodically. Don't try to do anything fancy. In other words, don't try to take shortcuts. Alright, so the first thing that we're looking at is 16 plus -7. So we follow our integer rules, and we get, which is when you're adding numbers of opposite signs, a positive and a negative, you find the difference between those numbers or subtract. So subtract 7 from 16 and you only have 9. But what you need to do is decide what the sign is going to be on the 9. And how you do that is you take a look at the two numbers, 16 and 7, pretend they don't have any signs on them for a moment, and which is the larger number, 16 or 7? 16. So it is a positive 9 for an answer. Now we've solved that in the blue, so let's write the rest of the problem down. So it would be minus 6, and then minus 16, and then plus 20. So what I've done is taken these pieces here, and I've just simply brought them down to the next line. And that's how I keep track when I'm doing problems like these. So this portion, 16 plus -7, is solved, and that's 9. That's the only thing that's changed, and that's line B. So then when we work on the next line, which would be C, let's pretend for a moment that first line is A. Okay, so now what we're going to look at is solving the next bit. And once again, don't skip anything. You're going to just go along left to right. So now work on this. However, this we have to follow integer rules because it's a positive minus a -6. And whenever you have a minus, you have to change the subtraction to addition. And you do that by changing it to addition physically, but you add the opposite. This has to be changed also. So what you're doing really is changing it to 9 plus 6. And that's pretty straightforward. We know what that is. 9 plus 6 is 15. So we have a new answer now, and we'll write the rest of our problem down. Remember, it's just methodical. It may seem like a waste of time when you're doing it on a test, but it's very helpful to keep track in this way. And even a teacher, somebody like me who's been doing this a while, I still do it this way. So if you notice what I did, I solved 9 plus 16, which is that answer. That's the only thing that changed. I just brought down the parts of the problem that are left. Okay, now we just work along methodically. In this situation now we have a 15 minus 16. So let's create our new line. That's line D. And we're going to solve 15 minus 16. Because 15 is smaller than 16, we're going to treat it like there's integers. So we're going to change the subtraction to addition. So what that means is, let's just do that so you can see it. This becomes plus negative. So you're adding the opposite. You literally change the subtraction to addition, but you have to add the opposite. And then you're following the addition rules for integers. You have two different signs, so you find the difference. The difference between 16 and 15 is 1. You ignore the signs for a moment and just take the difference between the two numbers. So that's 1. And then you decide, well, what sign do I want to put on 1? Well, once again, looking at the numbers without signs on them, which is larger, 16 or 15? 16, and that has a negative sign on it. So we really have an answer of -1. Okay, so let's write down what's left in the problem. We have plus 20. So once again, what I did was I solved 15 minus 16. I put that answer here. And then I brought down the rest of the problem, just like that. And now I'm on my last step. I'm going to do a -1 plus 20. Well, a -1 plus 20 is going to be using the addition rules. Find the difference between the numbers, which is 19, and then decide what sign will be on the number 19. Well, you look at the two numbers, which is the larger number, without the signs. 20. So 20 is positive, so then your answer to number 16 becomes positive 19. Okay, so then on this one over here, number 17, we've solved inside the absolute value first. We have a -22 plus a 19. So you find the difference between 22 and 19, which is 3. All I did was subtract 19 from 22. So we have line B, and find the difference, which is 3. So 3, and then you look at the sign of the larger number. The larger number is 22 when you take the signs off for a moment, and that's negative, so it is a -3. But we still haven't solved the absolute value. The absolute value signs are still there. So what's the absolute value of -3? Well, it's +3. So once we solved what's inside the absolute value signs, we got a -3. Then you take the absolute value of that solution, which is then 3. Okay, and we bring down the rest of the problem, which is -16 and then plus 14. All I did was bring down that, and that, and we changed and solved inside of there. Okay, so then when you have line C, we're going to just go from left to right, and we're going to resolve what's here first, which is 3 minus 16. So we have to use the integer rules. We're going to change minus to plus, so it's add the opposite and make 16 the opposite. We're going to find the difference between the numbers, which is 13, and then decide what sign to put on that 13. Well, the larger number is 16. So we put a -13 is going to be our answer for that little bit. And then let's continue to write down what's left of the problem. And once again, all I did was I solved inside there, or the first two, and then I brought down the rest of the problem, which then brings us to our last step, where we just find what is -13 plus 14. We use our integer rules. When you're adding a negative and a positive, you find the difference, which is 1. The difference between 14 and 13 is 1, and you use the sign of the larger number, and that's 14. So the answer is +1. Now on number 18, we have a little bit of math to do over here. Let's start inside the parentheses. Parentheses are not absolute values, but you do have a negative minus a positive, so you have to change the minus to addition, add the opposite. So when you add the opposite, when you add two negative integers, you're adding. You don't find the difference. So we add those and we get a -11. Okay, and there's no absolute value, so we don't change anything. Then we bring down the rest of our problem, So what we're going to have is negative 23 minus, keep track of what's going on, negative 11. So I would keep those parentheses. And don't worry, those parentheses are separating 11, negative 11. They're not telling you to work in the parentheses. Okay, so that's our line B. And then our next part of the problem, because all I did there, once again, was solved in the parentheses. I kept the parentheses just to separate that subtraction sign from that negative. Alright, but I go along and I still do it in order from left to right. So what is negative 23 minus 11? What you do is you have to change your subtraction to addition and add the opposite. So this is an addition. It's negative 23 plus plus 11. Negative 23 plus 11. But you follow your integer rules, which is find the difference. So the difference is 12. So right there we're going to have a 12, but we have to decide, well, what is the sign on the 12? We look, which is larger, 11 or 23? 23 is larger. 23 has a negative sign, so we end up with a negative 12. Let's bring down the rest of our problem, which is minus 6. So what I've done is I've solved these two, negative 23 plus 12, and then I brought this down, and that gives you a negative 12 minus 6. So remember, change, it's minus plus the opposite. So we're going to say plus the opposite. So negative 12 plus negative 6 is then an answer of negative 18. Because when you add the same integers, when you add two numbers that have the same integers, you keep the negative sign. So it's negative 18. And that's the answer to number 18.